and thank you for joining this IrisBG Coffee Chat today. I'd like to thank Mari for inviting me to present. My name is Laurel Matthew. I'm the Plant Records Curator at Lewis Skinner Botanical Garden in Richmond, Virginia. The title of my presentation today is Processing Generosity, the Challenges of Accessioning and Honoring a Significant Donated Personal Plant Collection. I'm excited about the opportunity to share our current big project with you all, and hope that you will in turn share your experiences, suggestions, or thoughts with me. While I have been using IrisBG occasionally since late 2015, I'm relatively new to working with the program full-time. So the presentation will have a quick introduction. I will then share the details of a large gift we've received. I'll go through a few of the challenges we've already run into in accessioning those records, and then move on to some challenges we're experiencing in properly honoring the donors. I have a case study prepared of one record through start to finish, and then at the end we have some breakout sessions that I hope will allow you to share your experiences and advice with working with a large donated plant collection. So a brief note about me: I earned my bachelor's in horticulture from Virginia Tech in 1998 and a master's in teaching from St. Mary's College in 2011. I had 2 short-term jobs in education, teaching 7th grade math and then informal education in our tropical butterfly exhibit. I learned so much there, and one of the things I learned was that I really want to be back with plants more often than math. So in 2013, I started working at Lewis Skinner Botanical Garden as their greenhouse horticulturist and orchid grower. At the time I started, we were not using IrisBG, and we did not have a full-time plant records curator. We migrated most of our garden's information to IrisBG in 2015. At the time, the orchid collection was still being kept in a Excel spreadsheet. So I had the opportunity to see the whole process of importing a large batch of data from Excel into IrisBG, and that was really helpful. Here's a picture taken from the gift that we are about to start discussing. We received a deed of land in 2015. This was granted to the garden after life rights have expired. This is to take effect only after the passing of the last surviving sibling, but we are discussing property management and plant collections with the current residents, Father Roy and his sister Elizabeth. They purchased this property in the 1980s. It's a little over 80 acres. They relocated to this property and built the residence that you see, and lived there as their family home. They brought an azalea and transplanted it here, and that was that. So over the next 35 years, the family purchased and planted and planned and added beds and expanded their collection. The family, Father Roy and Elizabeth, do continue to live there now, and the collection includes fabulous blooming species of rhododendron and azaleas like this My Mary, Herbert, Green Goddess, Sizzling Red, Millie Mac, and more, including this lovely pink, Bernadotte Fox Pink. So as I mentioned, the property is over 80 acres, and to the casual observer came wrapped in a tidy package, complete with this survey that you see here, named and labeled beds, okay, and labeled plant material in its own database called Plants Plus. Here you can see one of the plant labels. Father Roy types these out on a label maker and sticks them on these little metal tags and goes around to the garden to install them. The beds are all labeled as well. As of 2016, the family believed their collection contained over 1,800 varieties of azaleas, 50 varieties of deciduous azaleas, and 300 varieties of rhododendrons. We'll take a moment to get acquainted and then move on to this gift. Again, here are some of the details. There is a conservation easement on the property that protects it from overdevelopment in the future. We're looking at an estimated 12,000 specimens, and this estimation is a result of one of the record-keeping issues that we will talk about in a moment. We do have a nice partnership with the Azalea Society of America. They've worked with the family to plant many of these beds and do a lot of work in preserving legacy breeding plant material. There's also continued growth on the property. So the gift is beautiful and precious, but not without its challenges. And to show a little bit of the flowers that keep us moving in the direction, here are some of the cultivars that are on the property, including this one, Fancy Pants, which we will revisit in the case study at the end of the presentation. So as you can imagine, different members of the garden look at this collection in different ways. At first blush, it seemed perfect with the map and the labels and the database. At closer inspection, though, we do see a little bit of a different story. The plant collection itself over 35 years has become complicated, and the expectation that we get an accession quickly and apply for accreditation, which I will talk about in a bit, is that it's really complicated and this work is not moving as fast as we would like. Here are a few of the moments in the garden. The Lewis Skinner Nature Reserve, or LGNR, is the new name of this property. And here is the plant records team. You see Father Roy installing one of his labels. You also see Miss Elizabeth chaperoning him and holding the labels that are coming next. Their sister Madeline here on the right, she has passed. And we do want to move forward so that Father Roy and Elizabeth can, see the culmination of their work. They have such a nice relationship with some of the breeders. They do have a few cultivars named after them, and that's kind of exciting. So I mentioned the database before. They were using a software called Plants Plus, and I really wish IrisBG was an option for them when they were choosing their records. Unfortunately, pre-2000, this was what was available to the civilian plant collector, Father Roy, and he's been using it ever since. So you can see here a snip of the record as it would look like in Plants Plus. It looks like it would be really organized and full of information. It has plant name, group name, genus, bloom color, flowering season, hardiness, mature size, bloom, date, plant description, and you can also attach photos to the program, but not necessarily to the record. There are a few bugs in the software in that it is a program from 2000, which is no longer supported, and needs to run on a virtual machine that IT built into my computer that operates off of Windows XP or worse. That was the only way we were able to get a copy and make it functional here with our equipment. The problem, when you give all this information to a plant records curator, you quickly realize just because there's a plant database doesn't mean it's all simple now. So there was no IT support from the software company, no accession numbers associated with each cultivar or record. No dates were entered into the database to show when the plant material was acquired or planted. No plant sources are in the database. There are no quantities of each cultivar or at each location. No records of plant death or removal. Field use was inconsistent. There's a lot of room for user error or typos. They have limited backups. We can only export now as a text file. There's single user access, and it is not connected to the internet or cloud. So if they get new plant material on our offsite nature reserve property and entered into the database, I don't actually know that that has happened. So that's a problem. As I mentioned before, they do keep growing the collection, which we think is wonderful. On the left, you can see plant propagation in the greenhouse, and I just love how they label everything so nicely, and it's a really passionate work here. On the right, you can see one of the most recently added beds. This is from 2019, and I just fell in love with this cultivar mandarin lights. So as we move forward, trying to merge that nature reserve property with Lewis Skinner Botanical Garden and our current plant records practices, we have to figure out how to retrain 35-year-old habits, how to discover and incorporate lost information, how to perform a field inspection, how to communicate between the two sites, how to record the future collections growth, and how to move those records over from Plants Plus into IrisBG so that we can increase access and share the collection. Okay, so the second part of our conversation was really about honoring the work done by legacy collectors and legacy breeders. The American Public Gardens Association has a program called the Nationally Accredited Plant Collection Program. Since 1996, the APGA, in collaboration with the USDA Agricultural Research Service, has been recognizing exemplary plant collections, either curated by individuals, institutions, or multiple institutions. You get honor in the title, and you get a badge for your plant collection. So we really wanted to showcase the Cosby's plant collection work by applying for this accreditation. Again, it's not as simple as it sounds at first. In recognition of your institution's commitment to plant collections, preservation, and achieving a high standard of excellence, the benefits of the NAPC program also include the preparation process, which is a lot of work, but it does focus the attention of the plant records, curator, and the organization at large to this particular plant collection, and really helps us set some goals moving forward. So really quickly, I wanted to say this accreditation can be applied to either a genera or a subfamily focus or an adaptation. So you can organize your collection in a number of different ways to be able to describe it. So in California, there is an accredited bamboo collection. In Pennsylvania, the Phipps Conservatory has a slipper orchid collection that's accredited. In Colorado, Denver Botanic Gardens has a collection accredited for alpines of the world. So there are dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds of accredited collections. Azalea has 5 currently accredited collections. The first one is the Worcester Rhododendron Garden at Tyler Arboretum in Pennsylvania. Jenkins Arboretum curates an accredited collection. In Northwest Washington, there's a rhododendron species collection that's accredited, and 2 collections of North American native species. Okay, the one on the left is the North Carolina Arboretum, and on the right is the Connecticut College Arboretum. So that would be the other accredited azalea and rhododendrons collections in the United States as part of the APGA. So that's kind of the prize that we want to figure out how to earn through accrediting this collection. Quickly, there are some criteria required of an accredited collection, which is long-term institutional commitment, the governing body support, a living collections policy, which interestingly can be outdated at an organization and need to be refreshed, a designated curator, professional standards of maintenance, access to collections, plant replicates and long-term germplasm storage is preferred, and regular updates and on-site evaluation. So as we go through this list here at Lewis Skinner Botanical Garden, even after working on the project for a few years, we have the first 6 items handled pretty well, and we're still working on improving the last 2, the backup replicates and long-term storage, and regular updates and on-site evaluations. So we still have criteria to work on, and then We also need to consider the factors that would be considered in the application process, which include the quality of your existing collection, in particular in the light of how you define it, if it's all species or all cultivars or all breeding work. The current holdings, do you already have at least 50% of what you say you want to have? The potential for further development, the locations and conditions of the collection are favorable to continuing to grow. That you show and demonstrate excellence in collections management, that you have up-to-date plant records, that you have expertise with the plant group on staff, long-term stability and support in your institution, and unique enabling characteristics of the institution. So I did the same, go through and check out what we feel good about. And you can see, I think I switched up the colors here, but we feel good about the ones with checks on it, and we're still working at the quality of the collection, understanding whether or not we have 50% of the current holdings, coming to a point that we feel we have excellence in collections management, and then whether or not our plant records are up to date. So those are still the challenges that we have, and I believe that plant records is at the heart of those challenges and will also be one of the solutions. So as we move forward with the process, this is kind of where trying to get advice and information and thoughts from other institutions that have more experience in this sort of project would be really helpful, and I hope that there's an opportunity for me to learn from you all later on. Again, this is how the records in Plants Plus look, and then we're going to talk about how accessioning of those records moving forward can be challenging, but also how those challenges can be overcome. So as I mentioned, this is the record in the database currently. We had to get some outside assistance in Excel to turn this exported text file of these records into an Excel file. It did require some programming that we didn't have a specialty in our entire organization, so we had to go outside and lean on some other Excel wizards. But you see then we've just got the same information in a spreadsheet. The original idea was that we would do this the same way as we did orchids, which is then batch import these records into IrisBG and be done, and it all worked out easily. I've highlighted some problems with that, including the inconsistency in field use. Okay. Down here, the fact that multiple garden locations of the same cultivar, which we don't know came from the same or different sources, are listed on one line. So that has to be addressed as well. And finally, this inconsistent use in the plant name. It should be plant name here. Here would be a group name. This is something we'll talk about a little bit later, how we use group names with this type of plant material. And then they entered in whether or not it was deciduous in the genus. So that also needs to be addressed. So what we did learn was that we had so much data cleanup to do before we could ask IrisBG to import this information for us, that it wouldn't be an efficient way to tackle the problem. But we did want to continue on with trying to identify the strong suits in our collection, and this is how we're doing it now with the help of some lovely volunteers here at Lewis Skinner Botanical Garden, including Suzanne, who comes in every week to run a cross-reference of all the holdings at the Nature Reserve, the gifted collection, against all the total holdings or plant material registered by a certain breeding group. We want to know if we have significant work conserved at the Nature Reserve or where we want to grow the collection. So that takes us again to the final case study. So we talked about the process of taking Plants Plus information to Excel and wanting to get it into IrisBG ultimately, and the quick case study of taking one record called Fancy Pants, which I mentioned before. This is the Plants Plus record. We pulled the text file to Excel, which I mentioned before. Then we want to actually key in all this information into IrisBG. So doing it line by line, record by record is how we are currently attacking it, because it needs so much work, including the name verification. So the International Cultivar Register Authority for Rhododendrons is shown here, and this is their International Rhododendron Register and Checklist, second edition, and then there has been supplements since that edition of 2000. So then we have supplements ongoing. So some of this work is complicated. It hasn't been officially registered as a cultivar, and so we have to move on to other sources. This one, these records are from some really nice society work by the Azalea Society of America. So they have collected photographs and also published original publication and descriptions. So that's another place that we can go to verify the name. Okay, so at the end of all of this, you can see this was my sample, a kind of a test of accessioning one of these records into IrisBG. This accession number is something that is coming up as a question in the breakout rooms to follow. So pay attention to that. How would you assign accession numbers to this type of plant? You can see the taxon name, Rhododendron, Fancy Pants, that's the genus and cultivar, but there's this marshy point group in here. It's important to the donors and also to us to identify the group or breeding work done. And so we actually, in the taxa page, which I'm sorry I didn't show, have marshy point group entered in the group name on the taxa field. Okay, and then we were able to keep the contact information and the fact that there's a plant, and assign some images to this, but that's almost all the information we were able to put in from the original record. So we do have a lot of investigative work to find more information. Now, this is how that one record does look on Garden Explorer. I'm going to pull that up real quick. I really love this feature because it gives visitors from offsite access to our records and to information about the plant material. So in this, you can see we have a common name, or we can show there's evergreen azalea. We have some information on the culture, which we pulled from a reference, and some description. We also were able to include these hyperlinks in the record to either the resource or another interesting page that we are happy to link our visitors to so they can learn more about the plant material. This has been one of my favorite parts of entering information into a plant record, knowing that I'm providing little breadcrumbs for visitors to learn more about the plant material. And the other thing I like about this as well is that you can see here the nature reserve. I'm sorry, it's not going to want to move along with me. But the nature reserve is in the map, and people will be able to look at the record. And finally, I was able to keep that original Plants Plus record in as an image, and I think that's a real nod to the legacy work being done. So that would be the case study and kind of a long summary of the project at hand. The next portion of the presentation would be kind of our breakout session, where you have the opportunity to think, what would you do if this were your group of plant records? So I mentioned that there was some missing information about donors and planting dates. So we can talk about how much time you would spend tracking down missing information over 35 years from the donor. What app or tools you might use to conduct a field inspection as efficiently as possible. Next, what year would you use for your accession number? Would you use the year that collection was gifted to your organization, or the year in its original record? Or what if there is no year recorded? And interestingly, I've polled a few other plant records curators here in the United States that I happen to know. And out of six people I asked, I had 6 different answers. And I think that that's a real interesting problem, because we like to know what the right answer is and put information in the correct field. And so I'm really interested to know what you might have done. And also keep in mind, I haven't started the rest of the 2000s, so I really do have an opportunity to learn a lot here and incorporate one of your suggestions. And finally, what do you think the best field is to include a breeding group or another type of group? For example, there's a flower form group where you judge daffodils and other group information when we discuss roses. And then do you see any issue with the names, so the way those names display in IrisBG in that genus name, group name, and then cultivar name format? So those are the kind of things we're going to see in the breakout session, and I look forward to reading those. Please share. If we're listening, we really want to hear and learn from each other. I think that's one of the most valuable ways that we can pick up new strategies for plant records curating. And finally, I just wanted to say thank you so much for your time. Thank you for listening. And if you ever have a suggestion or a question or want to know how we're doing, feel free to email me. I appreciate the opportunity, Mari, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day.